The piercing scream cut through the humid Florida air like a blade. 8-year-old Willow Sterling had been leaning over the alligator pit railing, her curiosity momentarily overcoming caution. A single slip, a heartbeat of weightlessness, then the horrifying splash as she hit the murky water. Time slowed to a crawl. The massive bull alligator, 16 feet of prehistoric muscle and teeth, turned toward the disturbance. Visitors froze in horror. Zoo staff scrambled for emergency protocols. But one man moved without hesitation. Logan Westerly, a security guard standing nearby, vaulted over the safety barrier in a fluid motion, his weathered hands already drawing the hunting knife from his belt as he plunged into the water between the child and the approaching predator. Alexis Sterling had built her life on careful calculation and meticulous control. As CEO of Sterling Innovations, she transformed a struggling tech startup into a billion-dollar enterprise through sheer determination and strategic brilliance. Her corner office overlooking downtown Miami displayed the trappings of her success: awards, accolades, the evidence of a woman who had conquered the business world. But the photographs on her desk told a different story. They captured moments with her daughter Willow and her late husband James, whose plane had disappeared over the Atlantic 3 years ago. The tragedy had left Alexis hollow, armored in designer suits and protective routines. She scheduled every minute of her day, including the precious hours with Willow, as if structure could ward off further heartbreak. Her executive assistant knew better than to disturb her during board meetings, but when the frantic call came through about the accident at the zoo, Alexis didn't hesitate. She abandoned the quarterly projections mid-sentence, leaving stunned executives in her wake as she raced to her daughter. Logan Westerly's world had contracted to the confines of the Miami Zoological Gardens and the small bungalow he shared with his 10-year-old son, Milo. The walls of their modest home were adorned with hand-drawn sketches of exotic animals and faded photographs of dense jungle canopies, relics of a past life. Before donning the khaki uniform of a zoo security guard, Logan had traversed the most dangerous regions of the Amazon as a renowned wildlife expert. His intuitive understanding of predator behavior had made him the star of Wilderness Warriors, a documentary series that captivated millions. That life ended abruptly when a flash flood swept through their research camp, claiming several lives, including his wife, Elena. The man who once fearlessly tracked jaguars now moved through life with quiet caution, his adventurous spirit dormant as he focused solely on creating stability for his son. The wild remained in his blood, but he kept it carefully contained, until the moment a child's scream cut through the air, awakening instincts long suppressed. The zoo's medical center buzzed with tense energy as doctors attended to both the rescuer and the rescued. Logan sat stoically on an examination table, wincing slightly as the medical staff cleaned the deep gash on his arm, where the alligator's teeth had grazed him. His soaked uniform clung to his athletic frame, water still dripping onto the linoleum floor. In the adjacent room, Willow Sterling lay trembling, her clothes damp and muddied. The physical wounds were minimal, scrapes on her legs and arms, but her wide eyes reflected the shock of her near-fatal encounter. When Alexis Sterling burst through the door, her usual composed demeanor had cracked. Her designer heels clicked rapidly across the floor as she rushed to her daughter, gathering the small girl into her arms with uncharacteristic desperation. "Mommy, I fell," Willow whispered, her voice small and unsteady. "The man with the knife saved me from the big alligator." Alexis looked up, noticing Logan for the first time. Their eyes met across the room, hers filled with gratitude and lingering fear, his calm but weary. She straightened, instinctively reaching for her professional persona like armor. "I need to thank the man who saved my daughter," she told the attending physician, who nodded toward Logan. Alexis approached him with the confident stride that had carried her through countless boardrooms. Up close, she noticed the quiet intensity in his expression, the way his eyes assessed everything with careful attention. She reached into her purse and withdrew her checkbook, a reflex gesture for a woman accustomed to solving problems with financial resources. "I can't begin to express my gratitude," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. "What you did was extraordinary. Please, let me compensate you for your heroism and your injuries." Logan shook his head firmly. "I don't need payment. It's not why I did it." His voice was deeper than she expected, with a quiet authority that surprised her. Before Alexis could respond, the door burst open as a young boy with unruly dark hair, so similar to Logan's, rushed in. "Dad!" he cried out, his eyes widening at the sight of the bandages. "Dad, are you okay?" His small hands reached for his father's uninjured arm, gripping it tightly. "I'm fine, Milo," Logan assured him, his expression softening as he placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "Just a scratch." The boy turned to Alexis, his eyes serious beyond his years. "My dad's never done anything like this before. He always tells me to be careful." The simple statement hung in the air, making the man's actions even more remarkable. Alexis studied Logan with new understanding. Not a professional rescuer or thrill-seeker, but an ordinary man who had done something extraordinary. A father who had risked leaving his own child parentless to save hers. The realization hit her with unexpected force. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Logan Westerly." No title, no elaboration, just the simple facts. "Logan," she repeated, testing the name. "I'm Alexis Sterling, and the little girl you saved is my daughter, Willow." For a moment, none of them spoke. The air conditioning hummed. Medical equipment beeped steadily. Two single parents, two children, connected by a moment of crisis that had revealed something fundamental about human nature, something Alexis had forgotten existed in her carefully controlled world. Willow's nightmares began that same night. She would wake screaming about water and teeth, her small body drenched in sweat. The child psychologist recommended gradual re-exposure to the zoo. Confronting fears in a controlled environment was often the most effective treatment. And so, 1 week after the accident, Alexis found herself reluctantly walking through the zoo's entrance gates. Willow's hand clutched tightly in hers. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had built her career on facing challenges head-on, yet she wanted nothing more than to shield her daughter from this place forever. They found Logan near the educational center, conducting a safety briefing for a group of new security guards. His movements were measured as he demonstrated proper protocols for handling emergencies with dangerous animals. Watching him, Alexis recognized the authority of someone teaching from experience rather than theory. Willow tugged at her hand, surprisingly eager to approach him. When he noticed them, a flicker of surprise crossed his face before he politely excused himself from the group. "Miss Sterling," he acknowledged with a nod. "And Willow, how are you feeling?" To Alexis's astonishment, her normally shy daughter stepped forward. "I'm okay now. Mom says I need to see the alligators again so I won't have bad dreams." The simple honesty of a child, cutting through adult pretense. Logan crouched down to Willow's level, his voice gentle but not condescending. "That's very brave. Would you like to learn more about alligators? Sometimes when we understand things, they're not as scary." As Logan led them to a different viewing area, safer, designed specifically for educational purposes, Alexis noticed a boy sitting on a bench nearby, sketching intently in a notebook. Milo looked up at their approach, recognition flashing across his face. "Are you the girl my dad saved?" he asked Willow directly, with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Willow nodded, suddenly shy again. "I fell in with the alligators." "My dad knows everything about dangerous animals," Milo stated with matter-of-fact pride. "He lived in the jungle and studied them." He tilted a sketchbook to show Willow a remarkably detailed drawing of a jaguar. "I'm going to be a wildlife artist when I grow up." The children's conversation flowed naturally as Logan explained alligator behavior to Willow. How they weren't monsters but animals with predictable patterns, how to respect their territory, why the zoo kept them. His explanations were clear without being frightening, educational without being patronizing. Alexis found herself equally engaged, struck by the depth of his knowledge and his skill in translating it for a child. "Most animals don't want to hurt people," Logan told Willow as she watched the alligators with cautious fascination rather than terror. "They're just trying to protect themselves or their homes. Understanding their signals helps us stay safe around them." Their intended short visit stretched into hours. Milo proudly showed Willow his favorite exhibits, his enthusiasm infectious. Logan guided them through the reptile house, the aviary, the small mammals section. Alexis observed the gradual relaxation in her daughter's posture, the way her eyes brightened with curiosity rather than fear, and she found herself watching Logan, The way he moved with quiet confidence, the respect with which the other zoo employees treated him, the patience he showed with both children. When they finally prepared to leave, Willow surprised everyone by asking, "Can we come back tomorrow?" Alexis hesitated, caught between her instinct to distance themselves from the source of trauma and the undeniable evidence of her daughter's improvement. "Not tomorrow," she compromised, "but perhaps this weekend." As they said their goodbyes, Logan handed Willow a small card. "This is a special pass," he explained. "It means you're learning to be a wildlife guardian. If you come back and learn more about animals, you can get stamps to show your progress." The smile that lit up Willow's face was something Alexis hadn't seen since before the accident, before James's death, if she was honest with herself. She found herself making a decision that wasn't on any schedule or strategic plan. They would return to the zoo, not just for Willow's recovery, but because something about this place and these people had awakened something long dormant in herself as well. The weekend visits became a routine over the following month. Each time, Willow grew more confident around the animals, especially the alligators. Milo appointed himself her unofficial guide, his encyclopedic knowledge of wildlife rivaling many of the adult docents. The children's friendship blossomed naturally, their shared interest in animals bridging the gap between Milo's exuberant enthusiasm and Willow's thoughtful reserve. Logan would join them when his duties allowed, adding depth to their explorations with insights gained from years in the field. Alexis found herself looking forward to these unscheduled hours away from spreadsheets and conference calls. She began bringing work with her, sitting on benches with her laptop while the children explored nearby exhibits under Logan's watchful eye. Gradually, she spent less time on emails and more time observing the subtle interactions between father and son. The way Logan's hand would rest protectively on Milo's shoulder, the silent communication that flowed between them. It was different from her relationship with Willow, less structured, more intuitive, and she found herself both envious and intrigued. One Saturday afternoon, while the children were attending a junior zookeeper workshop, Alexis and Logan found themselves alone by the tropical aviary. The awkward formality that had characterized their early interactions had mellowed into something more comfortable. "Willow seems to be doing much better," Logan observed, watching through the glass as bright-colored birds darted among the foliage. "She approached the crocodile exhibit without hesitation today." "She's sleeping through the night again," Alexis agreed. "The nightmares have stopped." "I can't thank you enough for that, for everything." Logan shrugged off the gratitude, uncomfortable with praise. "Kids are resilient. They bounce back when given the chance. And adults?" The question slipped out before Alexis could filter it. Logan turned to study her, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on whether they want to bounce back or just survive." The insight struck uncomfortably close to home. Alexis had been surviving, not living, since James's death. Creating a safe, stable environment for Willow had become her justification for emotional isolation. Looking at Logan, a man who had clearly suffered his own losses yet remained engaged with the world, she wondered what she might be missing. "How did you end up working security at a zoo?" she asked, genuinely curious about this man who seemed both ordinary and exceptional. "You obviously know more about these animals than most of the staff." A shadow crossed his face. "It's a long story," he said simply. "This job lets me be home for Milo every night. Regular hours, no travel. That's what matters now." Before she could probe further, the children returned, bubbling with excitement about the snake they'd been allowed to touch. The moment passed, but Alexis found herself increasingly curious about the mysteries lurking beneath Logan Westerly's composed surface. The Miami Herald's archives revealed the first piece of the puzzle. Searching for information about the zoo's conservation programs for a potential corporate partnership, Alexis stumbled across a feature article from 5 years earlier. The headline caught her attention immediately. "Amazon's Wildlife Warrior Brings Jungle to Living Rooms." The accompanying photograph showed a younger Logan Westerly, standing confidently in dense rainforest, camera crews visible in the background. The man in the image radiated a charismatic intensity completely at odds with the reserved security guard she had come to know. The article described Wilderness Warriors as a groundbreaking documentary series that had brought unprecedented attention to Amazon conservation efforts. Logan Westerly was praised as both its star and its conscience, a rare expert who prioritized ecological truth over sensationalism. His wife Elena was mentioned as the series producer and a respected botanist in her own right. The final paragraph noted that filming for the fourth season was underway in a remote region of Brazil. But there had never been a fourth season. Alexis's further searches revealed the tragic explanation. Headlines from 4 years ago told the story in stark fragments. Flash flood strikes documentary crew in Amazon. 3 dead, 4 injured in wilderness warriors tragedy. Producer among casualties in jungle disaster. The most detailed account described how unseasonable rains had caused a flash flood that swept through the base camp without warning. Logan had led rescue efforts, saving several crew members and local guides, but Elena and 2 others couldn't be reached in time. The revelation cast Logan in an entirely new light. Not just a security guard who had acted with unexpected courage, but a man who had once moved through a completely different world. A world of adventure, purpose, and public recognition. What would make someone abandon such a life for the quiet anonymity of zoo security? The articles hinted at controversy surrounding the accident, but the details were vague. Alexis's research was interrupted by a call from her CFO, Marcus Daniels. The board has been reviewing potential expansion opportunities, he began without preamble. There's an interesting property that's come onto our radar, the Miami Zoological Gardens. Her attention sharpened immediately. The zoo? Why would Sterling Innovations be interested in a zoo? Not the zoo itself, Marcus clarified. The land, 20 prime acres in a rapidly developing area of the city. The zoo's been struggling financially for years. Word is they're considering offers. And what would happen to the animals? The staff? Alexis asked, thinking of Willow's newfound passion. Of Milo's drawings? Of Logan? Relocated to other facilities, presumably. The real value is in the development potential. We're thinking a technology-focused resort complex, a showcase for Sterling's latest innovations in hospitality automation. The board wants a feasibility assessment by the end of the month. The conversation left Alexis unsettled. The zoo had become more than just a therapeutic environment for Willow. It had become a rare space where both of them could breathe outside the pressures of their regular lives. The thought of it transformed into another sterile luxury development felt unexpectedly painful. Her disquiet deepened the following day when she attended a lunch with Gerald Hayes, a former documentary producer who had worked briefly with Logan. Ostensibly a meeting about a potential wildlife conservation initiative that Sterling Innovations might sponsor. Alexis found herself steering the conversation toward wilderness warriors and its abrupt end. Hayes's expression darkened. Terrible business, that whole tragedy. Changed a lot of lives. Logan Westerly seems to have disappeared from the public eye entirely, Alexis observed, keeping her tone casual. Was that related to the accident? Hayes hesitated, swirling his wine thoughtfully. Off the record? There were questions about the decisions made that day. Logan led the team into an area that some considered too risky, given the weather forecasts. When the flood hit, he chose to evacuate the indigenous guides first, said they had the least emergency training and equipment. By the time they got back for the production team, he shrugged eloquently. His wife was among those who didn't make it out. Lee was blamed? Alexis asked, remembering the man who had instantly risked his life for her daughter. Never officially. The investigation ruled it a natural disaster, unpredictable and unavoidable. But the whispers were enough. That, combined with his grief, he just walked away from everything. Surrendered his contracts, declined interviews, vanished. Last I heard, he was working odd jobs somewhere in Florida. Hayes leaned forward. Why the interest in ancient history? Yes, curious about the background of these conservation initiatives, Alexis deflected smoothly. Sterling Innovations values thorough research. That evening, as she reviewed the preliminary zoo acquisition materials her team had prepared, Alexis found herself unable to concentrate. The clinical assessment of the property's value and development potential felt hollow in light of what she now knew. The zoo wasn't just real estate, it was a sanctuary. For the animals, certainly, but also for people like Logan and Milo, who had found purpose there after tragedy, for Willow, who was healing there, perhaps even for herself. When Willow asked to visit the zoo that weekend, Alexis made an excuse about work commitments. The truth, that she couldn't face Logan knowing what she now knew about both his past and the zoo's potential future, was too complicated to explain. She ignored his text message asking if Willow was feeling well, responding with a brief, impersonal assurance that they were simply busy. The corporate mask was easier to wear than confronting the uncomfortable emotions stirring beneath her carefully maintained surface. The following week brought the formal acquisition proposal before Sterling Innovation's executive committee. As CEO, Alexis could have easily influenced the decision, but she found herself uncharacteristically silent as the discussion unfolded. The financial case was compelling, the return on investment projections were excellent, the synergies with their technology portfolio undeniable. No one mentioned the educational programs that would be lost, the animals that would be displaced, the staff who would lose their specialized jobs. No one had any reason to care about a security guard with a troubled past or his artistic son. Alexis, your thoughts? The board chair's question pulled her from her reverie. The numbers are promising, she responded neutrally. I'd like to review the community impact assessment in greater detail before making a final recommendation. That evening, Willow confronted her with the direct honesty that children often wield more effectively than adults. Why aren't we going to the zoo anymore? I miss Milo. And I didn't finish my wildlife guardian passport. Mr. Logan said I was almost ready for the silver level. Alexis looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw how much she had changed since the accident. The fearful child who had awakened screaming had been replaced by someone more confident, more curious about the world. The zoo visits that Alexis had initially viewed as therapeutic necessity had become genuinely important to Willow. We've been busy, sweetheart, and I thought you might want to try some different activities. Willow's expression grew serious. Is it because of your company? Milo told me his dad is worried the zoo might close because some big company wants to buy it. The innocent question landed like an accusation. What makes you think it has anything to do with my company? Because you stopped taking me there right after you had all those meetings about new projects. Willow's logic was simplistic but cutting in its accuracy. If you close the zoo, where will all the animals go? Where will Mr. Logan and Milo go? The questions haunted Alexis as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her elegant bedroom. When had she become someone who could casually dismantle others' worlds for the sake of a promising balance sheet? When had business strategy become more important than human connection? The answers were uncomfortable. Threads leading back to James's death, to her determination that control and success could insulate her and Willow from further pain. With sudden clarity, Alexis realized she needed to understand the full story, not just about Logan, but about the zoo itself. Making decisions without complete information was contrary to everything she valued as a business leader. If she was going to support or oppose the acquisition, she needed to do so with integrity. The Miami Film Festival's archives held the complete collection of Wilderness Warriors. Alexis spent a full day reviewing episodes, watching the Logan of 4 years ago navigate treacherous terrain with confident ease, explain complex ecological relationships with passionate clarity, and advocate for environmental protection with authentic conviction. The contrast with the quiet man she knew was striking, yet hints of that former self occasionally shone through in the way he taught Willow about animals or guided his fellow security staff. The final episode, the last one completed before the tragedy, contained footage that contradicted the whispered accusations. Far from being reckless, Logan was shown repeatedly checking weather reports, consulting with local guides about terrain safety, and establishing clear emergency protocols. His respect for the indigenous communities was evident in every interaction, not a sudden priority during crisis, but a consistent value that informed all his decisions. Alexis's next stop was the office of Dr. Margaret Chen, the zoo's director of conservation. I am researching potential philanthropic initiatives, she explained, only partly untruthfully. I'm particularly interested in understanding the zoo's financial challenges and community impact. Dr. Chen's assessment was candid. We're operating on the edge, financially speaking. Ticket sales cover basic operations, but our educational programs and conservation efforts depend on grants and donations that are increasingly difficult to secure. And yet you maintain some of the highest animal welfare standards in the country, Alexis noted, having reviewed their accreditation reports. That's non-negotiable, Chen stated firmly. We'd close our doors before compromising on that. Every animal here receives exemplary care, whether they're crowd-drawing attractions or critically endangered species that most visitors walk past without noticing. I understand you employ Logan Westerly, Alexis said, trying to sound casual. His background seems unusual for security staff. Something protective flashed in Chen's eyes. Logan is one of our most valuable team members, regardless of his official title. His knowledge of animal behavior has prevented numerous potential incidents, and his salary here comes nowhere close to what he once earned, but he's never complained. She hesitated before adding, "Did you know he anonymously funds our reptile conservation program? Uses the residuals from his old series. Doesn't want recognition, just wants the work done." The final piece clicked into place when Alexis spoke with the zoo's financial director and learned that an anonymous conservation foundation had recently expressed interest in partnering with the zoo, offering substantial funding in exchange for expanded educational programs and research facilities. The opportunity could transform the struggling institution, but only if they retained control of the property. If Sterling Innovations purchased the land, the foundation would take their support elsewhere. Driving home, Alexis finally admitted the truth to herself. Her reluctance to face Logan wasn't about awkwardness or corporate strategy. It was about recognition. In him, she saw a mirror of her own grief and the different paths they had chosen through it. While she had retreated into control and structure, building walls around herself and Willow, Logan had found purpose in quiet service and creating safe spaces for others to learn and grow. His dramatic rescue of Willow wasn't an anomaly. It was consistent with who he was at his core, someone who placed others' needs above his own safety and comfort. The revelation left her both humbled and inspired. For the first time since James's death, Alexis allowed herself to consider whether her carefully constructed life was truly serving its purpose. Was she protecting Willow or limiting her? Was she honoring James's memory or hiding from the pain of it? The questions had no easy answers, but asking them felt like a necessary first step towards something authentic. That night, Alexis worked until dawn, not on acquisition strategies but on an alternative proposal, one that would transform both Sterling Innovations and the Miami Zoological Gardens in unexpected ways. The early morning sunlight cast long shadows across the zoo grounds as Alexis approached the staff entrance. She had timed her arrival deliberately, knowing from Willow's detailed recounting of zoo routines that Logan would be completing his morning security checks before the public arrived. She found him exactly where she expected, by the alligator exhibit, inspecting the reinforced barriers that had been installed after Willow's accident. He looked up at her approach, surprise evident in his expression. "Ms. Sterling, this is unexpected." "Alexis," she corrected him, "and I apologize for our abrupt disappearance. It wasn't fair to the children, or to you." Logan's reserve was palpable. "No explanation necessary. Families get busy." "That's not why we stopped coming." The direct admission felt foreign on her tongue. Alexis Sterling, known for strategic communication, choosing blunt honesty instead. "I discovered who you were, who you are. And I learned that my company is considering purchasing this property for development." Something shuddered in his eyes. "I see. And now you're concerned about Willow associating with someone controversial, or are you here to assess the property value personally?" "Neither." Alexis placed a thick folder on the bench beside him. "I'm here to offer a partnership." Logan's confusion was evident as he cautiously opened the folder to find a comprehensive business plan. The cover page read, "Sterling Conservation and Technology Center, a proposal for innovation in environmental education." "I don't understand," he said finally. "Sterling Innovations has the technology and financial resources to transform this zoo into a world-class conservation and education facility," Alexis explained. "What we lack is the expertise and authentic commitment to wildlife protection. That's where you come in." She outlined her vision as Logan read through the proposal. A reimagined institution that would combine cutting-edge technology with traditional zoological practices, creating immersive educational experiences while advancing genuine conservation efforts. Sterling would provide the funding and technological infrastructure, the zoo would maintain operational control and expand its wildlife protection programs. And my role in this? Logan asked cautiously. Director of Conservation Education if you want it. Your background makes you uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between scientific research and public engagement. Or you can remain exactly where you are, whatever makes you comfortable. This isn't conditional on your participation. Logan studied her with the same careful attention he might give to an unpredictable animal. Why? Sterling Innovations could make more money developing this land commercially, because some things matter more than maximizing profit margins, Alexis answered simply. My company has always claimed to value innovation that improves lives. It's time we expanded our definition of lives to include more than just humans. She placed a small USB drive on top of the proposal. This contains the complete restored archives of Wilderness Warriors, all episodes, including behind-the-scenes footage that never aired. At his startled look, she added, I have connections at the Film Festival archives. They were helpful. I haven't watched those in years, Logan said quietly. Not since Elena. I know. And that's your choice. But Milo deserves to see his father as he truly is. A man who has always put others first, whether they're indigenous communities, endangered species, or little girls who fall into alligator pits. Alexis turned to leave, pausing only to add, the board meets next Tuesday to make the final decision. I've recommended the partnership approach, but I can't guarantee the outcome. Either way, Willow and I would like to resume our weekend visits, if that's still welcome. She walked away without waiting for his response, her heart pounding with the unfamiliar sensation of having acted on instinct rather than careful calculation. For the first time in years, she had made herself vulnerable to rejection, to failure. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The Sterling Conservation and Technology Center opened its doors 6 months later, heralded as a groundbreaking collaboration between corporate innovation and environmental stewardship. The former Miami Zoological Gardens had been transformed with thoughtful integration of technology, augmented reality experiences that brought extinct species back to virtual life, real-time tracking systems that showed visitors the natural movement patterns of the animals, interactive learning stations that connected the zoo's conservation efforts with field projects around the world. Logan Westerly had accepted the position of Conservation Education Director after considerable deliberation. His first initiative had been to develop a comprehensive training program for security and animal care staff, incorporating his extensive field experience with the latest research in animal behavior. His second had been a complete redesign of the educational materials, replacing simplified anthropomorphism with age-appropriate scientific accuracy. The Alligator Conservation Exhibit, built on the site of Willow's accident, had become one of the center's most popular attractions. Rather than downplaying the dangerous nature of the animals, the exhibit emphasized responsible interaction with predator species and the critical role of apex predators in healthy ecosystems. The safety barriers were now state-of-the-art, virtually invisible to visitors while providing enhanced protection. Alexis found herself spending more time at the center than her executive schedule theoretically allowed. She had initially justified these visits as necessary oversight of Sterling Innovations' significant investment. As weeks passed, she admitted, at least to herself, that her motivations were more personal. She enjoyed watching the growing friendship between Willow and Milo, now official junior conservation ambassadors who led tours for visiting school groups. She appreciated the way Logan had cautiously begun sharing more of his past experiences, integrating stories from his expeditions into the educational programs without sensationalism or self-promotion. Most surprisingly, she valued the gradual evolution of her own relationship with Logan. Their initial awkwardness had given way to professional respect, then to a comfortable collaboration, and finally to something that resembled friendship. They were different in countless ways. She structured and strategic, he intuitive and adaptable. But they shared a fundamental integrity that created an unexpected bridge between their worlds. On a warm evening in early spring, they found themselves alone on the observation deck overlooking the new Amazon rainforest biodome, a spectacular recreation of the ecosystem Logan had once called home. The last visitors had departed. The center was quiet except for the recorded sounds of nocturnal creatures awakening. Milo showed me his college application essays today, Alexis mentioned, leaning against the railing. He's remarkably talented. His wildlife illustrations could easily be published. Logan nodded, pride evident in his expression. The University of Florida's wildlife ecology program would be lucky to have him, though I'm not sure I'm ready for him to leave home just yet. You have 2 years to prepare, Alexis reminded him with a smile. And it's only a few hours' drive. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the mist rise among the artificial canopy. So much had changed in the months since Willow's accident, changes neither of them could have anticipated. I never thanked you properly, Logan said quietly. Not just for saving the zoo, but for making me face my past instead of hiding from it. I think we're even, Alexis responded. You saved Willow's life, and in the process you show me that control and caution aren't always the answer. She hesitated before adding, James, my late husband, used to say that life's most important moments rarely appear on any schedule or strategic plan. I forgot that after he died, tried to plan away all the uncertainty. And now? Logan's question was gentle but direct. Alexis turned to face him fully. Now I'm learning to wade into alligator pits when necessary. His laugh was unexpected and genuine, a sound that still surprised her each time she heard it. Impulsively, she reached out and took his hand. The gesture was simple but significant for two people who had built careful walls around themselves for so long. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. No dramatic declarations followed, no promises or grand gestures, just the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes healing comes in unexpected forms, through facing fears rather than avoiding them, through connections rather than isolation, through embracing life's unpredictability rather than trying to control it. Below them in the staff lounge, Willow and Milo had finished organizing materials for the next day's educational program. Through the window they could see their parents on the observation deck, hands linked, silhouettes outlined against the simulated twilight of the biodome. The children exchanged knowing smiles, their long-running Operation New Family apparently succeeding at last. 1 year to the day after Willow's fall, the Sterling Conservation and Technology Center held a special event commemorating both the accident and the transformation it had inspired. Hundreds of visitors gathered in the outdoor amphitheater as Alexis took the stage, looking uncharacteristically nervous despite her extensive public speaking experience. What happened in our alligator exhibit last year could have been a tragedy, she began. Instead, it became a catalyst for something extraordinary. One person's split-second decision to act with courage rather than caution changed not just my daughter's life, but the future of this entire institution. She gestured toward Logan, who sat in the front row with Milo and Willow on either side of him. We often think of heroes as people who are fearless, but true courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. It's recognizing when something matters more than our own safety or comfort. As she continued her speech, outlining the center's achievements and future plans, Alexis realized how profoundly her perspective had shifted. The businesswoman who had once valued control above all else now embraced collaborative uncertainty. The mother who had tried to protect her daughter through structure and caution now encouraged Willow's adventurous spirit within reasonable boundaries. After the formal presentations concluded, the four of them walked together through the grounds. Willow and Milo raced ahead, eager to show visitors their favorite exhibits.
The gym fell silent as Caleb Monroe approached the deadlift platform. Wearing his gray janitor uniform, sweat stains visible under his arms, he stood out among the athletic wear and designer brands. Snickers rippled through the room. A personal trainer whispered something to his client, and they both laughed. Someone pulled out a phone, ready to capture what they assumed would be a humiliating moment. Caleb ignored them all, methodically wrapping his calloused hands around the bar loaded with 441 pounds of weight. The laughter stopped abruptly when he lifted it off the ground with controlled power, his face a mask of quiet determination. Have you ever been judged by the job you do, by the clothes you wear? Well, watch what happens when a man doesn't need to say a word and an entire room falls silent. Caleb Monroe hadn't always been the janitor at Elite Fitness. 38 years of life had carved deep lines around his eyes that spoke of experiences most gym-goers would never understand. 12 years as a Marine had shaped him into a man of few words and deliberate actions. He'd been honorably discharged after a helicopter accident in Afghanistan, left him with a titanium rod in his left leg and a Purple Heart that stayed buried in a drawer at home. The military had given him discipline, strength, and an unshakable resilience. It had also given him the title of 3-time deadlift champion in his weight class across all branches of the armed forces. But that was a lifetime ago. Before Sophie, his wife, lost her battle with cancer, before little Josie, now 8 years old, became his entire world. Caleb worked the night shift at Elite Fitness, mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, and maintaining equipment from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. The job offered just enough to keep their modest 2-bedroom apartment and provide for Josie's needs. More importantly, it allowed him to be present during the day for school drop-offs, homework, and dinner together. His routine never varied. After walking Josie to school, he would return home for 4 hours of sleep before picking her up. They'd spend the afternoon together, homework, cooking, sometimes a trip to the park, before Mrs. Alvarez from next door would come over to stay with Josie while he worked. 3 times a week, he would use his employee benefit of free gym access, coming in during his break to maintain the physical strength that had once defined him. Once a week, Josie would find him watching the street door of his gym, wondering what her father had been telling him to do, to maintain the physical strength that had once defined him. He never spoke about his military career or his accomplishments. The photos of him standing on podiums with medals around his neck existed only in photo albums that Josie sometimes asked to see. "Tell me about when you were a hero, Daddy," she would say, and he would smile and tell her that being her father made him more proud than any medal ever could. 6 months ago, when a personal training position had opened up at Elite Fitness, Caleb had quietly submitted an application. Despite his extensive military training background and proven athletic achievements, the manager had taken one look at his resume and shaken his head. "Look, Monroe, you're a good worker and we appreciate what you do around here," the manager had said, not quite meeting his eyes. "But our clients expect a certain image. You understand, right? No formal certification, no fitness industry experience. Plus you're..." Well, he gestured vaguely at Caleb's scarred hands and the slight limp he still carried. "Our brand caters to aspiration. We need trainers who embody what our clients want to become." Caleb had nodded once, returned to his mop, and never mentioned it again. He didn't need the extra money or recognition. Every time Josie wrapped her small arms around his neck and declared him the strongest daddy in the world, he had all the validation he needed. His strength had a purpose, to be there for his daughter, to protect her. Everything else was noise. When Josie had asked him last week if he was still as strong as in the photos, he'd simply smiled and told her, "Strong enough for what matters." But later that night, staring at the ceiling, he'd made a quiet decision to push himself during his next gym session. Not to prove anything to the world, but to honor a promise he'd made to himself when Sophie died. To stay strong, to stay healthy, to be there for Josie as long as she needed him. So when his break came on this particular Tuesday afternoon, Caleb changed into his workout clothes but kept his gray janitor's shirt on. It was the only clean one he had. He headed to the weight room, focused only on the workout he had planned, unaware that his quiet presence was about to disrupt the carefully curated atmosphere of Elite Fitness. The moment Caleb pushed through the double doors into the main weight room, he could feel the atmosphere shift. The usual buzz of conversation dimmed momentarily as several pairs of eyes turned toward him. Most quickly looked away, but a group of 3 young trainers near the deadlift platform maintained their stare, exchanging glances with one another. Elite Fitness catered to the upper echelon of society, executives, entrepreneurs, and social media personalities who paid premium membership fees for top-of-the-line equipment and an exclusive environment. The late afternoon was peak hours for the Instagram crowd, those who came as much to be seen as to work out. Caleb kept his eyes forward as he walked through the room. The weight of stares pressed against him like a physical force, but years of military discipline had taught him to compartmentalize discomfort. He focused on his breathing, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, a technique that had carried him through far worse than social awkwardness. As he approached the deadlift platform, one of the young trainers, a man in his 20s with perfectly styled hair and a tight-fitting branded shirt stretched across his sculpted chest, stepped into his path. "Excuse me," the trainer said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Members only in this section." His smile didn't reach his eyes. Caleb reached into his pocket and produced his employee ID card without a word. The trainer glanced at it dismissively. "Oh, maintenance, right." He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. "Don't hurt yourself on the equipment, buddy. Wouldn't want to file an incident report." Laughter rippled through the group behind him. A woman in matching neon workout gear nudged her friend. "Isn't that the guy who cleans the locker rooms?" "Yeah," her friend replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "I guess they let anyone in here now." Caleb walked past them to the platform, his face betraying nothing. He began his warm-up routine, methodically stretching his hamstrings, back, and shoulders. The whispers continued. "Look at him, he's still wearing his janitor's shirt. Probably can't afford proper gym clothes on that salary. Someone should tell him deadlifts aren't for beginners." A phone appeared in someone's hand, angled toward Caleb. "This is going to be gold," a voice murmured. The young trainer who had confronted him earlier was now speaking to a client but kept glancing over with barely concealed amusement. When Caleb began loading plates onto the bar, the trainer's eyebrows shot up. He excused himself from his client and sauntered over. "Whoa there, Chief," he said, hands raised. "Let me help you with that. That's way too much weight for someone at your level." Caleb continued methodically adding plates to the bar. "Seriously, man," the trainer persisted, his voice carrying an edge of condescension masked as concern. "That's 400+ pounds you're loading up. I can't let you do that. It's dangerous." "I thought—" A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the confrontation. The phone cameras were more obvious, no longer hidden. Someone snickered about "Janitor tries deadlift, instantly regrets it" being the perfect viral video title. For the first time, Caleb paused and turned to face the trainer. Their eyes met, and something in Caleb's steady gaze made the younger man take a small step back. There was no anger there, no wounded pride or embarrassment, just a calm, immovable presence that seemed suddenly larger than his 5'11" frame. "I appreciate your concern," Caleb said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. They were the first words he had spoken since entering the room, and they carried the weight of authority that couldn't be taught or bought. The trainer hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "Look, we have a responsibility—" "I understand," Caleb interrupted gently. "I'll sign a waiver if you need one." Without waiting for a response, he turned back to the bar, adjusted the final plate, and secured the collar. 441 pounds exactly, his personal best from his military days. He hadn't attempted this weight in nearly a decade. The trainer stepped back, clearly torn between maintaining his authority and the growing sense that he had misjudged the situation. "Your funeral, man," he muttered, just loud enough to save face with his watching colleagues. Caleb didn't respond. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather belt, the same one he'd used in his competition days. As he wrapped it around his waist and tightened it with practiced movements, the room grew quieter. Something about his methodical preparation suggested this wasn't his first time. He stood before the loaded bar, feet shoulder-simp apart, toes pointed slightly outward. His breathing slowed as he centered himself, eyes focused on a point in the middle distance. The chattering, the stares, the phone cameras, all faded away as his world narrowed to just him and the weight before him. Caleb's hands, calloused from years of physical labor, gripped the cold metal bar. His fingers wrapped around it with the familiarity of greeting an old friend. He took one final deep breath, filling his lungs completely, then braced his core as he had done thousands of times before. The room had fallen into an expectant hush. Even those who had been laughing moments before sensed the shift in energy and watched with uncertain expressions. The young trainer who had tried to stop him crossed his arms, a defensive posture betraying his discomfort. Caleb bent at the hips, maintaining the natural arch in his lower back, knees bent at precisely the right angle. His form was flawless, the product of years of training and discipline. For a suspended moment, he was perfectly still, gathering his strength. Then he moved. The initial pull from the floor was the hardest part, the moment when inertia had to be overcome, when 441 pounds of dead weight fought against the laws of physics. Caleb's leg muscles tensed, bulging against the fabric of his work pants. The veins in his forearms stood out like rivers on a map as he pulled upward with controlled power. The bar broke free from the ground. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple as he continued the lift, keeping the bar close to his body, his back maintaining its rigid form. His breath came out in a controlled hiss between clenched teeth. This was the critical phase, the bar passing his knees, the transition to the hip hinge, the final drive to stand upright. The weight plates rattled slightly as the bar continued its upward journey. Someone in the crowd gasped audibly. The young trainer's crossed arms had fallen to his sides. Caleb drove his hips forward, shoulders pulling back as the bar rose past his thighs. The titanium rod in his left leg, the permanent reminder of his sacrifice, bore the weight without complaint. His face reddened with effort, but his eyes remained clear and focused. With a final surge of power, he locked out at the top of the lift, standing fully erect, shoulders back, the massive weight held steady in his grip. 441 pounds of iron, suspended in perfect balance. His chest expanded with controlled breath as he held the position. Time seemed to stop in the weight room. The only sounds were the distant thumping of music from the cardio area and Caleb's measured breathing. Not a single phone moved to capture the moment. All were lowered, as if recording it would somehow diminish its authenticity. The young trainer's face had drained of color. The women who had been whispering about the janitor stood motionless, eyes wide. An older man in expensive workout gear nodded almost imperceptibly, a gesture of reluctant respect. Caleb held the weight for 3 seconds, textbook perfect, before beginning the controlled descent. With the same precision he had used to lift it, he lowered the bar gradually, maintaining perfect form until the plates touched the floor with a surprisingly gentle thud. He straightened up and released the bar. Without looking at anyone, he reached for the small towel tucked into his belt and wiped his hands. His breathing had already begun to normalize, another testament to his conditioning. The silence in the room was deafening. Caleb began methodically removing the weights from the bar and returning them to their proper racks. No one approached to help. No one dared break the spell with words. He cleaned his sweat from the equipment with the same care he used when performing his janitorial duties, leaving it spotless for the next user. When he had finished, he gave the platform one final survey to ensure everything was in order. Only then did he turn and walk toward the exit, his gait steady despite the enormous exertion. As he passed through the crowd, which parted unconsciously to make way for him, he didn't make eye contact with anyone. There was no triumphant smile, no challenging glare at those who had mocked him, just the same quiet dignity with which he had entered. Just before the door closed behind him, one of the young trainers, not the one who had confronted him but another who had laughed along, called out, "Hey man, that was something else." Caleb paused briefly, nodded once in acknowledgement, and continued through the door. In the locker room, away from the stairs, Caleb sat on a bench and allowed himself a moment of stillness. His muscles trembled slightly from the exertion, a reminder that while his body remembered the movement, it had been years since he had pushed himself to this limit. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, centering himself. It hadn't been about proving anything to them. It had been about keeping a promise to himself, about honoring who he had been and acknowledging who he was now, about being able to look Josie in the eye and know he was still the man he wanted her to believe he was. The locker room doors swung open and Caleb opened his eyes to see Marcus, the older gentleman who had nodded during his lift. In his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and the lean build of a lifelong athlete, Marcus was a regular who usually kept to himself. "That was impressive work out there," Marcus said, his voice carrying the gentle authority of someone used to being listened to. "Military?" Caleb nodded. "Marines." Marcus sat on the bench opposite him. "Thought so. I was Army myself back in the day, Special Forces." They shared a moment of understanding that required no further explanation. "You compete?" Marcus asked. "Used to," Caleb replied. "3-time Armed Forces champion, heavyweight division." Marcus let out a low whistle. "And now, you're here, keeping this place running." It wasn't a question, and there was no pity in his voice, just a straightforward acknowledgement. "Life happens," Caleb said simply. Marcus nodded. "That it does." He reached into his gym bag and pulled out a business card, offering it to Caleb. "I run a non-profit for veterans. Got a gym space where some of the guys meet up. Nothing fancy like this place, but good equipment, good people. Could use someone with your experience to come by, maybe share some pointers. Paid position?" Caleb looked at the card but didn't take it. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got a routine that works for my daughter and me. Night shift here, days with her." "The offer stands," Marcus said, placing the card on the bench between them. "No pressure, just veterans helping veterans." He stood up and extended his hand. "Marcus Reeves." Caleb shook it firmly. "Caleb Monroe." "Good to meet you properly, Caleb Monroe," Marcus said with a nod. "Those kids out there, they don't know what they don't know, but they'll remember what they saw today." After Marcus left, Caleb changed back into his full work uniform and slipped out through the service entrance. He had 15 minutes before his break ended, just enough time to walk to the elementary school 2 blocks away. Josie was waiting on the bench outside the after-school program, her blue backpack clutched in her lap, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that was already coming loose after a day of play. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made every sacrifice worthwhile. "Daddy," she called, running to him and throwing her arms around his waist. He lifted her up with ease, her 45 pounds nothing compared to what he had just lifted, yet infinitely more precious. "Hey, Pumpkin, how was school?" "I got an A on my science project." Mrs. Thompson said my solar system was the best one because all my planets were perfectly round. "That's my girl," he said, setting her down and taking her backpack. "Let's get Mrs. Alvarez and then head home. I'm thinking spaghetti for dinner tonight." "With meatballs?" Josie asked hopefully. "With meatballs," he confirmed, taking her small hand in his as they walked. Josie chatted about her day, unaware of what had transpired at the gym, unaware of the stares her father had endured or the silent victory he had claimed. To her he was simply Daddy, the man who checked for monsters under the bed, who knew how to braid hair even though his fingers were too big for the tiny elastic bands, who never missed a parent-teacher conference despite working all night. And for Caleb, that was enough. More than enough. The next day, when Caleb arrived for his shift, there was a noticeable difference in how people greeted him. The front desk staff, who had previously barely acknowledged his presence, offered a genuine "good evening." The closing manager made eye contact when giving him the nightly cleaning checklist instead of simply leaving it on the counter. Word had spread throughout the staff about what had happened in the weight room. The video that someone had started recording, expecting a moment of humiliation, had instead captured a display of quiet mastery. It had been shared among the employees, though thankfully not posted publicly. Elite Fitness had strict policies about filming in the gym. Around midnight, when the club was empty save for the security guard at the front desk, David Mercer, the general manager, sought Caleb out. Caleb was disinfecting the yoga mats when David cleared his throat from the doorway. "Got a minute, Monroe?" Caleb set down his spray bottle and clothed. "Yes, sir." David gestured for him to follow, and they walked to the small office at the back of the club. David closed the door and took a seat behind the desk, motioning for Caleb to sit opposite him. "So," David began, leaning forward with his hands clasped, "I heard about what happened yesterday." Caleb remained silent, waiting. 441 pounds, David said, shaking his head slightly. "That's more than anyone on our staff can lift, including our so-called strength specialists." "It was just a workout," Caleb replied evenly. David studied him for a moment. "I owe you an apology. When you applied for the trainer position, I made assumptions based on superficial things. I was wrong." Caleb shifted slightly in his chair but maintained his composure. "No apology necessary. You made a business decision." "A poor one," David admitted. "I've been reviewing your application again. 3-time military champion, certified in physical training through the Marines, experience coaching other soldiers." He tapped a folder on his desk. "Impressive resume that I failed to properly consider." He leaned back in his chair. "I'd like to offer you a position, part-time to start, working with some of our more serious clients. Veterans, law enforcement, a few competitive lifters, people who care more about results than appearances." Caleb took a moment before responding. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Mercer, but my current schedule works for my family situation. My daughter needs me during the day." "We could work around that," David pressed. "Weekend sessions, early mornings before school, The pay would be significantly better than maintenance. Caleb looked down at his hands. Calloused, scarred, capable hands that had carried him through war, through grief, through the challenges of single parenthood. Hands that were good enough to clean toilets and good enough to lift more weight than anyone else in the building. "I'm here because this job lets me be there for my daughter," he said finally, looking up. "The hours work. The routine works. I'm not looking to change that right now." David nodded slowly, a new respect visible in his expression. "I understand, but the offer remains open, and in the meantime," he slid a paper across the desk, "I've approved a raise for your current position. Should have happened a while ago, given your reliability." Caleb glanced at the paper. A 15% increase. It would make a difference, allow him to start building Josie's college fund a little faster. "Thank you," he said simply. David stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for your service, Monroe, both to our country and to Elite Fitness." Later that week, when Caleb entered the weight room during his break, the atmosphere had changed noticeably. There were no stares, no whispers. Instead, several members nodded in greeting. The platform where he had performed his deadlift was unoccupied, though the gym was busy, as if it had been unconsciously reserved for him. As he began his warm-up, he noticed the young trainer who had confronted him watching from across the room. After a moment's hesitation, the trainer approached, his body language markedly different from their previous encounter. "Hey," he said, stopping at a respectful distance. "I wanted to apologize for the other day. I was out of line." Caleb paused his stretching and straightened up. "Jason," the trainer added, extending his hand. "Jason Reeves." "Caleb," he replied, accepting the handshake. "I know," Jason said with a sheepish smile. "Everyone knows now." He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Look, I was wondering, if you ever wanted to, your form was perfect, and I've been trying to improve my own deadlift technique." "You want some pointers?" Caleb finished for him. "Yeah," Jason admitted. "If you have time, no pressure." Caleb considered the young man before him, probably not much older than he had been when he joined the Marines. Cocky, but maybe not irredeemably so. "I'm here Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, same time," he said. "You're welcome to join." Jason's face brightened. "Really? That would be awesome. Thanks, man." After Jason left, Caleb continued his workout, lifting a more moderate weight today. 350 pounds for his working sets. Still impressive, but not the statement he had made earlier in the week. He didn't need to prove himself again. As he finished his final set, he noticed a woman watching him from the stretching area. It took him a moment to recognize her as one of the pair who had made comments about the janitor during his previous session. She quickly looked away when their eyes met. Caleb cleaned the equipment, as always, and headed for the locker room. As he passed through the cardio area, he heard someone call his name. Turning, he saw Marcus, waving him over to where he was cooling down on a stationary bike. "Thought that was you," Marcus said. "How's the leg today? 441 pounds is no joke, especially with hardware." Caleb rotated his ankle unconsciously, a little sore, nothing serious. Marcus nodded knowingly. "Ice it tonight. Trust me." He gestured to the treadmill beside him. "Got a minute?" Caleb checked his watch. He still had time before he needed to return to work. "Just a quick cool down," Marcus said, seeing his hesitation. Caleb stepped onto the treadmill and set it to a comfortable walking pace. "Been thinking about your situation," Marcus said, keeping his voice low. "The single dad thing, the night shift, I respect that you've got priorities straight." Caleb maintained his steady pace, waiting. "My veterans program, it's flexible. We meet Saturday mornings, but I could use someone to come by once a month, just to talk deadlift technique, maybe share some of your military training experience. Good for the younger vets to see someone who's transitioned successfully." "I'm just a janitor," Caleb said without self-pity. "You're a father who's doing what needs to be done for his kid," Marcus corrected. "That's success in my book." Caleb walked in silence for a few moments, considering. "Time Saturday a month," Marcus continued. "You bring your daughter if you need to. We've got kids' activities during the sessions. 2 hours of your time, decent compensation," he smiled. "And a chance to lift with people who won't be shocked when you load up the bar." For the first time since their conversation began, Caleb smiled slightly. "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask," Marcus said, extending his hand. And my offer to just come lift with us anytime stands, no teaching required. As Caleb's break ended and he returned to his maintenance duties, he found himself considering Marcus's offer. It would be good for Josie to meet other military kids, to understand that part of his life better. And he had to admit, there was something appealing about being in an environment where his strength and experience were valued rather than surprising. The night passed quickly, and before he knew it, his shift was ending. As he gathered his things from his locker, he noticed David Mercer entering the employee area earlier than usual. "Monroe," David acknowledged. "Good shift?" "Yes, sir," Caleb replied. "All tasks completed. Log is updated." David nodded. "Before you go, I wanted to let you know, the young man you had the interaction with, Jason, he came to me yesterday and specifically requested mentorship opportunities with you." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "I told him that would be entirely up to you," David continued, "but it speaks volumes that someone who was so unprofessional now sees you as someone to learn from." He smiled slightly. "Just thought you should know the impact you're having around here." As Caleb walked home in the early morning light, he thought about impact, about ripples spreading outward from actions rather than words. He had never been one for speeches or self-promotion. Even in the military, his leadership had been by example, by quiet competence rather than charisma. Maybe there was a middle ground between being invisible and being in the spotlight, a way to honor his past without being defined by it, a path that would allow him to be the father Josie needed while also being true to other parts of himself. 1 week later, Caleb stood by the deadlift platform, observing Jason's form as the young trainer attempted 300 pounds. "Hips lower," Caleb instructed quietly. "Chest up. Engage your lats before you pull." Jason adjusted his position, taking Caleb's guidance seriously. His next attempt was markedly better, his form more efficient. "Good," Caleb said with a nod. "That's how you protect your back for the long haul." Across the gym, a new member asked one of the front desk staff about the unusual pair, the young, polished trainer taking instruction from a man in maintenance clothes. "Who's that guy?" the new member inquired. The staff member smiled, the only person who ever made this entire gym fall silent with a single lift. Near the entrance, Josie waited patiently on a bench, her homework spread out before her, occasionally glancing up to watch her father with pride. It was Saturday morning, and after Caleb finished his session with Jason, they would be heading to Marcus's veterans gym for the first time. Not as a teacher yet, but as visitors, testing the waters. Caleb caught Josie's eye and gave her a small smile. She beamed back, waving enthusiastically. In that moment, with his daughter's smile warming him from across the room, Caleb realized that the weight that truly mattered wasn't the 441 pounds he had lifted that day. It was the responsibility he carried every day as a father, the commitment to show up, to persist, to be present. The strength required wasn't just in his muscles but in his heart, the determination to provide Josie with everything she needed, even if it meant cleaning floors at night and swallowing his pride during the day. As he finished his session with Jason and walked toward Josie, Caleb felt a quiet contentment settle over him. His life wasn't perfect. It wasn't what he had planned when he was younger, but it was his, and he was making it work. One day, one decision, one deadlift at a time. You don't need to lift 441 pounds to prove your worth, but train anyway, not for applause, but to be strong enough for those who depend on you every day. Take care of your health, not just for yourself, but for those you love most.